A couple of months ago, I decided to shape my own longboard. It ended up being a 9'4" log, and I must say I really enjoy this particular board for the conditions in South Africa during summer. But there was one thing that I had left out when I shaped it, and that was also shaping a single fin. I decided not to shape a fin initially because I wanted to get a feel for the board and understand a little bit more of the dynamics of what I might need in a fin. I wanted to buy one, and when I looked at the prices online, it would end up costing about 20% of what I paid for the entire board, which just didn't make any sense to me. So I decided to use something that I already have to make my own fin. A friend had given me a piece of acrylic. Now, acrylic isn't your first material that you would think of when you want to shape a surfboard fin, but I had worked with acrylic before, and I know it's quite strong and resilient, especially if it's quite thick. And the piece I had was 12 millimeters thick, so I figured the worst that could happen was it would break and I would have to try again with a different material. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this fin, and maybe you can learn something. I hope you enjoy the video. Now, as mentioned, I had an old plastic fin that I would use as my basic template, and then I adjusted it according to the shape that I wanted. But I basically just used the fin that I had as a French curve to get all those nice lines to work the way I wanted it. In the end, I stuck the template down, and my template is an 8-inch fin, which would typically go for an 8-foot board. You normally have 1 foot of board for every inch of fin typically, but I wanted a slightly shorter, thicker, or let me rather say wider fin. So at the base it's quite wide, as you can see. As I mentioned earlier, this acrylic is 12 millimeters thick. I then went along and marked out parallel edge lines to allow me just a rough guide for when I was grinding, so that I didn't grind away too much material. And I also flipped the fin constantly to make sure that it stayed symmetrical throughout the whole shaping process. I used a very coarse 80 grit sanding disc on my grinder to do this work, and then once that was all done, I would use normal sanding paper with a palm sander to smooth it all out again. So the grinder was 80 grit, and then I moved along to 100, 150, 200, 400, 800 and 1000. You could go higher, but I didn't bother, it was smooth enough. This is a little trick if you don't already know it. Simply by quartering your sanding paper, you have a perfect size piece of sanding paper for most palm sanders. So you don't have to cut it or guess how big it has to be. You can just fold it in half twice. You can see I'm already sanding down to probably 800 grit here, or 1000. This is very close to how it ended up being. And then I had to attach the hardware and make sure that it would fit into the fin box. I definitely recommend using a different fin, maybe a manufactured fin, just as a rough guide to the shape that you want and where to place the hardware and all of that. This is relatively simple, but you can quite easily mess it up if you don't follow rough guidelines. And there's the final fin. In the end, it came out really well, exactly the way I wanted it. and it works perfectly. In fact, it's notably faster and smoother than my previous plastic fin that I used. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video. Cheers.